Chapter 21 3-1 You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Mail's sudden lash out was weird and uncalled for Wraith, even though he had predicted a betrayal based on Mail's pretense so far. He didn't expect that the one that held dear and called his friend would be holding a grudge towards him and would think of him this way. An embodiment of failure. Mail was the one that gave him words of hope every time he thought he couldn't amount to anything. Mail was the one that told him it might be possible to switch archons, that maybe there was still hope for him and he shouldn't give up. Mail's words of encouragement in Wraith's heart had built a stronghold of persistence and are one of the reasons why Wraith had not committed suicide and can survive the harsh 3 months. 3 months of good friendship. It wasn't long, but for Wraith, who had never had a true friend, it meant much. But it seems this young man has been harboring some ill thoughts toward him while smiling at him. Maybe he wouldn't have recognized it if he didn't go to the abyss. But Wraith was not about to naively seek for an understanding or an explanation. His expression said that much. His brows were furrowed and his heterochromia eyes shone with bitterness and irritation as they focused on Mail. Those words. I won't ask you to take them back. And I will take it that those are your feelings from the moment that we met. Is it the money you need so badly? Or you can't just stand the sight of me? Damn. Will you look at this bastard? Staying there and talking to me calmly, is it the money you need so badly? Yen. Mail mimicked him with a mockery pout and tone tuning. Scram all that. Give me the money and I'm not asking. Mail said and swung his hand to the front. Apparently, he had swiftly pulled out a pair of black daggers from behind him. And Wraith had no idea it was there. You are not even going to wait for us to get to the tunnel. It doesn't matter where we do this. I have the upper hand. 2 men walked into the room as Mail spoke. Wraith recognized the somewhat fat one, the guard they met outside a few hours ago. And the other, he didn't pay that much attention to him, but he was there too a few hours ago. So you all were in on this from the start. From the start. Kukukukuku. Mail let out a shoulder-shuddering laugh with his face buried in his palm. You really are a naive little noble. What did you expect from a place called the black market? All I did was offer them a fee higher than that which they are getting paid. Illegal activities are what makes this place the black market. Don't be so foolish. As expected, you have been here multiple times. Yes, and this is not my first time doing this. How do you think I'm able to afford to live in Rembrandt Estate? You think a 20,000 lose monthly payment from the store keeps me living large and get me fine clothes? Mail cocked his head with an irritated glare as he pointed the dagger to Wraith, who was standing still and had not taken a step since. But I must admit, I have never gotten a deal such as yours, and I thought I could pull it off on my own, but looks like my dear friend isn't so dear after all. Nobles like yours ruined my family. I'm just collecting a ruination tax. Yeah, see it as that. You talk too much, let's get this over with before someone comes in. As his bulky physique would have suggested, his voice was thick. He clenched his fist and focused his attention on Wraith's hand. Is that it? Yes. I'm collecting my 10 million, no games. Sure, Mail responded to the man diligently with a grin. Come here, handsome. He dashed at Wraith with a shout, spreading his arms in the air for a grapple, but Wraith's kick reached him first. Pow, sending back 3 staggering steps. The power didn't come out as I'd envisioned. Wraith's face was gloomy as he shifted his gaze and keenly observed the 3 of them. Wow, I guess a failed hero is still a hero after all. Mail scoffed and lunged at Wraith, his eyeballs thinning in as he spread into the distance in a brief second, reaching Wraith in that instance. Wraith with widened eyes dodged Mail's sequential swings, moving back, bending his head, dodging left and right till his back was against the wall. Cronk, the last swing scratched the wall as Wraith rolled out of Mail's space and immediately was countered by the second guard with a low kick. He quickly got up regardless. He had taken more beaten than they could ever imagine. Right now their attacks were like a mosquito bite compared to how rough Thard, Harl treated him. It was when he stood up and gave himself and the three of them some distance they noticed. "Hey! Where is the case?" the bulky guard said with a frustrated glare and annoyed tone. His right, male's tone was low. They scanned around the room while maintaining their positions, but the case could not be seen in any visible corner. "You bastard, what trick are you playing now?" Male's tone was a bit lower than before with a befogged face. "It's a good thing they don't know about inventory." A corner of Wraith's lips curved upwards and he subtly released a degrading scoff. The three of them were adjacent to each other with Wraith at the center but too far for the person he was directly opposite to reach in a matter of seconds. The bulky guard was towards his left and considering his weight Wraith determined that he would be slow. "The only problem is..." Wraith's gaze slowly drifted to Male, "that he's a level E. I don't even know if I measure up to him since I have never gone for an evaluation. But from his speed from earlier, I can tell that his paces are quick." Wraith carefully scrutinized for who he should lunge at as Serenity played with the atmosphere between the three for a few more minutes. Creak like a call waiting to be answered, the door opened and an amber blonde-haired lady whose figure shone beautifully even though her face was masked and her body was tightly blanketed by a black gown. The unexpected entrance put the four in a brief moment of incomprehension, the three of them actually. "Oh, my God. Thank God you are here, ma'am, they are trying to gang up on me." Wraith was quick to jump on the uptake. Chapter 22 The Sadness of a Taboo. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wraith was not going to be unrealistic with things. That had never been in his character. He knew when to give up and when to press harder. Taking on the three of them at this stage of his was bad, very bad, and would result in his death. If he wanted to hide his abilities for the time being, then he knew that he mustn't die in front of anyone. Just when he was seeking a way out, a blessing was sent his way. The fact that only he knew how important the person who entered the room was his upper hand. While the other guard who was closer to the door cluelessly dived towards the lady who showed no agitated or provoked response but slipped through with finesse. That was what they saw, but she had buried a blow deep into his belly that as she slipped through he was blasted through the wall, delving a hole into the wall. She twisted her hand. That was relieving. She muttered and shifted her face to the fat guy who lifelessly exchanged glances between the lady and the hole in the wall. "What? W.hu.a.ou?" His voice broke as he inquired. "Isn't that the point of this mask? I can't have you knowing who I am." Everyone in the room was unmasked except the lady. "And I recognize you," the lady said, pointing at Wraith. "Scram. You bitch." Male launched from into the air with a somersault. A gale of wind gathered around his daggers and he tore down a slash upon the woman who swung her feet into the air to block, revealing the silver boots she had just bought. "Oh, this can even block attacks like this." Not just that. Wham! Upon the next breath, the boot released a massive shockwave that tossed Male away and broke all the glasses in the room. The lady slowly put her leg down in awesome wonder at what she had just seen. Damage reflect. Is that what it's called? Wait, did that boot always have that ability, and Harl never used it? Wraith was gobsmacked. Male could not recover from the throwing force and groaned in pain like a squabbling baby. The lady's gaze shifted to the last man standing. As fat as he was, he should have boasted of more courage, but nah, he began to quiver and clambered to the door, staggering and picking himself up till he was out of sight. "Explain yourself." The lady's focus was now fully on Wraith. Wraith with a humble demeanor began to speak with partial sincerity, leaving out the part where he had recognized her the moment he met her in the banquet hall and that it was his item she was proudly wearing on her skinny-ass-sexy legs. I see. This man indeed is a pathetic fellow," she said, looking down on Male who was not in pain anymore but still wouldn't get up, or else he wanted to receive a second beating. "If it happens once, it's a coincidence, if it happens twice it is fate." Ah. Her words were causing a contradiction in Wraith's perception of her personality. Wraith had thought she would be this proud and nonchalant kind and somewhat arrogant lady, but with her uprightness, bright speaking, and nosy attitude, she had the time to sit down and listen to the whole story. Maybe not all high-rankers are rotten. I can sense dust in you. Which Archon contracted you? Of course, that was going to happen. Every time a hero meets another one, the first thing that matters is who their Archon is, their level, their perks, and skills, how many monsters and gates they've challenged, and their achievements. 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 But Wraith was not all of that. He hesitated to speak. It is no need to keep your Archon a secret from other heroes. Who knows, we might be from the same Archon, then I shall consider you my brother. In arms, and if we aren't. Pardon. She gazed at Wraith with no readable expression, sincerely trying to figure out what his question was driving toward. If we happen to not be from the same Archon. The lady's gaze sank to the ground as she tapped her fingers on her folded arms as though she was counting something. I've decided that it doesn't matter, we can be friends since you just got betrayed by one. Her upright and bright way of speaking warms up the heart. But I'll be stupid to befriend a stranger again after all this, he said, looking at Mail. As if the asshole was waiting for it. He flipped up and shouted. Ha! Friends! With this failure. My lady, you can't befriend a man like him. A man chosen by the Death Archon. Holy shit. Her belated attempt to cover the foul words that came out of her mouth showed that she spoke by impulse. It showed how much dread follows one that is chosen by the Death Archon. Such a hero is labeled as a taboo in the entire world. A living taboo. Then you must be Delegado Raven Wraith. Her tone came out clothed in a form of pity. Wraith could see it written all over her mask and demeanor. You are rotten to the end, aren't you? He said, looking at Mail, who wore a wicked grin on his face. You have my thanks, I shall not forget today's debt, he said, and walked out. The lady's head followed him till he left the room and sharply swung back to Mail with a sting stare. Don't think you are going to walk out of this free. She said, and her tone meant those words. Wraith, upon reaching the main sales street of the market, looked into the dark clouds. Sometimes, I wish I can be darkness, not be cared about, not be noticed and not be weak. He dropped his head and sorrowfully walked through the crowds and into the tunnel ahead of him. Chapter 23. End of the countdown. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Time remaining, 00.00.46.54. It was just like yesterday when the countdown was 7 days. Just like yesterday he got stabbed and had to live his whole week denying the fact that he was wallowing in the pain of betrayal. His dream apartment. He hadn't even had the time to take proper measures, not with the second trial coming so fast. At least he has been eating to his content, sometimes using the motel services and sometimes going to a restaurant whenever he feels like clearing his head. He did try expensive meals the first 2 days, but he found himself losing his appetite afterward. Every time he ate and he is reminded of the countdown, the food suddenly becomes bitter. Like that, he couldn't just lay around, he had to think of how to survive in that dark world. But nothing worked. His lack of license prevented him from getting equipment from any shop, although using his familiarization with Eleanor's shop he could have been able to buy one at least, but he contemplated till he finally decided not to go. That place had Mail written all over it and he just didn't want to face the bastard again. Even though he wasn't sure Mail would still be there, he didn't want to take the chance. He looked out of the window. The red light that seeped out of the horizon due to the surfacing of the twilight reddened a part of his small room, while the thick darkness, unlike other nights, radiated every other corner. There was no one to say goodbye to, no one to talk to, no one that will be expecting his return. All he could do was look into the red sky as seconds blew into minutes and minutes into seconds. 00.00.00.04, 00.00.00.03, 00.00.00.02, 00.00.00.01, 00.00.00.00. Alert. The abyss draws you in, you will be transported to the abyss. Huh? I'm not even asleep though. Wraith was baffled. He thought the abyss was something that would happen when he sleeps, so he had made sure to sleep so much that he didn't feel sleepy the entire night of this horror that was coming. He saw his lower body, starting from his legs, fade into the darkness, and like smoke, the rest of his body followed through. Damn! What will I call this, he thought as he was met by a massive black gate with an eerie and weird structure, one he could not find meaning for but felt somewhat familiar. 3 heads with different horn structures were sculpted on the black gate, and in a position of a spiral with the horns intertwining. Wraith belatedly looked down and saw no solid surface, instantly realizing he was floating in a plane of darkness that flowed like clouds. The gate that stared into his soul was the only solid structure that could be seen no matter how far and wide he looked. It was just the darkness. Where is this? Like he would always watch in movies, he imagined the space as a mass of water and swam further. It worked. He slowly swam towards the gate. The closer he got to it, the bigger he got in front of him, and as he touched the gate he realized he was shrouded in the entire structure of the gate the whole time. He lifted his head and couldn't see the high end of the gate. It was the same for the bottom end, the left end, and the right end. And behind him was sparkling light like a star. It was a new change to the place, but his instincts felt safer closer to the door than to the star. Staring at it suddenly made him feel naked and defenseless. These were symbols he couldn't understand, but maybe this is the real way of entering the abyss, he thought to himself, and wondered why he didn't enter the right way the first time. Applying a little push force to the gate in front of him, before he could tell it coming, he was warped into the gate that slowly creaked open and the mass completely disappeared. Meanwhile. Lean, did you feel that? Feel what? A pointed-ear female with white hair decorated by flower lilies and with a white and overflowing gown asked as she climbed down the ladder of the towering shelves to meet the brown-haired man with a hollow face who had spoken to her first. This is not a joking matter, we must shush. With her fingers on her small round lips, he came to an abrupt pause. We can't disturb the archons because of some trivial matters. Felfium is a place of horror and disaster. Even if he does enter, he won't be able to survive. We sealed his dust, remember. He is powerless regardless of how much he tries. Still, we should. The man hesitated as she turned to him with an emotionless face. I apologize, BDNV. He dropped his shoulders and bowed his head. As the Pontifex of Alacra, it is my duty as bestowed on me by her lady to manage matters regarding Fel. The dust choosing him was a mistake. I pity him, for his life would be filled with so much suffering. He will try and try, yet he won't be able to move a step forward. Because he is bound to the essence of failure and is just a pawn of it. Tears rolled down the lady's white cheek as she spoke and cleaned her tears dry afterward. Lean. The man's eyes were filled with dread, as he had just seen the greatest display of wickedness. How can she destroy a young man's life like that and still cry for him? His shoulders shivered as he thought about the unreasonable and crazy stunt Lane had pulled 7 years ago, the day Wraith was supposed to be selected as a hero. This was not the abyss Wraith knew, and it was confusing. Welcome to Felfium, Chapter 20. For the Child of Death and Darkness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. An endless space of stays arrayed in the sky beyond him. Unlike the empty feel of the abyss, he knew this was different. He would have almost called it beautiful if not for how odd the stars of this world were. They had different colors, but red, purple, and green were the most prominent colors amongst this array, and following this array was a trail of red aurora that left the reflection of the icy plain. He stood shrouded in a coat of redness. Welcome to Felfium, Wraith was dismayed and confused, but he wasn't dumb and was quick on the uptake. Felfium. The word sounded very familiar to him. From the book, Many Things We Wished We Didn't Know. Wraith rubbed his chin as the holographic tab stared back at him with the same message, nothing more nothing less, but soon disappeared. Isn't Many Things We Wished We Didn't Know written by the heretic Hallen Lamer, which was supposed to be his last book expressing his regret of how he spent his life because of a certain enlightenment he came by. Wraith scratched his hair, trying to break into the lingering memories of the book with his thoughts. Falfium. The lines were still blurry, but he was sure that it sounded very familiar and it was spoken about in that book. He looked forward at the wide snowy plain. Immediately the cold breeze blew past him, gripping him by his bones. He shivered irresistibly and sneezed. "I have to find shelter," he said as he began to walk forward, with every step buried deep into the snow as he walked along a straight path following the lead of the aurora. A while later, Wraith reached a cabin that stood alone in the snow. The rooftops were covered with snow such it would easily be mistaken to have been purely molded by snow, and the structure itself gave an ominous feel. But Wraith didn't mind, that was the least of his concerns right now. He fastened his pace, still couldn't prevent his legs from going into the snow but made sure he was quick regardless. As he got closer to the cabin, the depth at which his leg was buried drastically reduced, and with a slight touch from him the door swung open as if it was expecting him. Luckily what Wraith sought after was already there: fire. His eyes lit up and sparkled with the flames which reflected in his balls from inside the room's fireplace. The cold was unbearable for him. He was lucky because his jackets were thick to a certain degree thanks to Kavanaugh's cold temperature. However, this place's temperature was far superior to that of Kavanaugh, a cold that gripped him by the throat and continually forced something out of it, but with every sneeze, nothing came out. Not to mention his bones, especially his legs, he could feel his toes frozen even though they were inside his Chelsea boots. He sat in front of the fireplace with delight and haste, not caring to look around the house. He immediately stretched his toward the fire. He never thought he would one day appreciate and love the presence of fire so much. "I see you are quite the reckless young man." Like a thundering clap, the bass tone snuck into his ears from behind as a massive figure occupied the doorway and its shadow was cast all over Wraith as he entered the cabin. He was wearing a very thick jacket with black furry edges. The jacket itself was brown and no outstanding designs could be seen on it apart from the pockets towards the lower base. Wraith's gaze slowly went up with a gaze. The man smiled back at him. His beard was white as well as his hair, and his face was filled with wrinkles that instantly gave away the fact that he was quite old, but those murderous eyes hidden behind his smile and his awfully large body negated the obvious fact. "You should at least close the door, shouldn't you? Or you could get eaten." Wraith gulped as the man closed the door and walked towards what one would call a parlor, but it was just two wooden chairs. One of them was a rocking chair with a small stool in between the two and the man's wooden bed made with black straws. Towards the corner of the room and to the base of the bed was a rectangular table that the man's belongings such as books and wood carvings stayed on. Linear to that table was the fireplace which Wraith sat in front of. "Where are you from?" the man said as he sat on the rocking chair with a deep exhale, insisting that he had a long day. I. Wraith's mouth shivered for the first few seconds. It could have been the cold or fear, but he realized he didn't know exactly what to tell the man and paused. First of all, he wasn't expecting there to be another human, at least human-looking creature in the abyss. Or am I not in the abyss? The man with a stagnant smile awaited his response. Isn't this place the abyss? The man's gaze immediately changed, finally revealing his murderous gaze with eyeballs that glowed and exuded a purple aura. It wasn't a fluke, even the room's atmosphere bowed to his expression and the air was seized. The flames lowered itself so low that it could die any moment. The cold and pressure of the room terrorized every bit of Wraith's body. His eyes couldn't dare to behold the man twice and stayed on the ground with beads of sweat forming on his forehead in this intense cold. The abyss. Ha 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 ha. The man immediately switched again to a peal of thundering laughter, ridding the atmosphere of the pressure. The fire began to burn high again and the cold slowly was eradicated, and so was the tension on Wraith's shoulders. "I see, you came through the gate," he said. Yes, the gate." Wraith was glad to hear something he could relate with. "How weird, you are human. How are you here?" The man's voice came from Wraith's side. He realized the man was not sitting on the chair opposite him before realizing he was already bending beside him. right at his blind spot. Wraith turned, flustered, and quickly backed away from the man. Hasten crawling. No need to be scared. A human in Felfium is going to be a big deal, you should be happy you met me first. The odd thing is, I can feel the gazes of the abyss on you. What is that? Isn't this place supposed to be the abyss? Wraith asked. Well, it is supposed to be but isn't. The abyss is in Felfium but takes many forms. The abyss could be me, could be the air, or could be the fire staring back into your eyes. The man shifted his gaze into the fire for a few minutes before he complained. But the abyss only reveals itself to the chosen. The chosen. Yes, the child of death and darkness, who will carry on the will of the ruler of Felfium. Chapter 25 Felfium. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Son of Death and Darkness. The name sounded so like Wraith's class, but he was wise to keep mute. Let's not feel too important, mine is the child of death. Besides, this man just said I'm human, there is something odd to this place. Sir, if I may ask. What is this Felfium? I just entered the gate after it revealed itself to me. Oh. Interesting. The man said, rubbing his white beard as he looked at Wraith, most especially his eyeballs, which were of two different colors. The gate has never been revealed to anyone, not even to the higher demon lords who are trying to get out. Could he be? The man sighed. That is impossible, the absolute seat has disappeared for over 3 million years and Felfium has adapted to an empty seat. For the good of the realm, it is good that he shouldn't be back, to prevent an unprecedented war. The man stood up and spoke as he walked back to his seat. If the door opened to you, then it is the will of the abyss that you should be here, then I guess you are in the right place. But you can't survive in a place like this, you will get killed immediately you step into the city. He sat down. You asked before that what is Felfium. Felfium is a dimension of 13 realms, you are currently in Jarhan, the 13th realm. This place is native to fiends, but you won't find the strong ones like the demons roaming around here because it is the lowest of the lowest. Ah, Wraith's eyes widened. Is he scared? The man wondered as he had deliberately put some intimidation to his tone as he told Wraith what Felfium is, but this young man was surprised by something else. I never thought it was true. Fiends and monsters of even the rarest kind, a place where they all gather and call home. That is Felfium. But the pontifices condemned his works and banned them. He was later executed for heresy. How? I thought they were just imaginations. Young man, you don't have to be so scared, it's nothing. The man paused as a bright smile spread on Wraith's face. A place I thought was an imagination existed, is this it? Is this my breakthrough? I can finally find a place I fit into. His smile was filled with emotions and tears gathered beneath his eyes. The man could not still tell what was happening. He had no idea how much this young man had longed to escape the reality he was given. Although little did he know, that this reality was not going to go easy on him either. I suppose you are happy being here. Even if it's a realm that hoards creatures of darkness and death. Wait, if this is Felfium, then there must also be the place where the dead go to, like a path to the afterlife or something. Wraith asked with excitement and a raised brow. You must be talking about Avernus Lake. But it can't be considered a place, it is like a workplace and said to connect directly to a part of the abyss where all things are judged. Even we fiends have to go there one day when they die. No one that is filled with darkness and evil can escape that place. He responded with his arms folded but suddenly released his arms and leaned forward. Young man, how do you know about Avernus? Have you really been to the abyss? He asked. Wraith, full of excitement and like a child, a version of himself that existed in the books he read, responded with a bright and innocent face. Yes. Wow. Who did you meet? Thard, Harl, I was made to challenge him. Thard, the man's mouth fell open and his hands covered them as he slowly stood up from his seat. Oh my God. The abyss revealed itself to him. I heard Harel was imprisoned in the abyss, by Fel's last aspect 500 years ago. Is he the chosen one? The man went to one knee. Ha! Wraith cocked his head with a confused look. If what I am thinking is right, then there will be a need for you to be protected because the higher lords will be against you. So tell me in detail what happened. For once Wraith felt the freedom to talk to someone. And in this case, he wanted to. He poured out everything that had happened from his childhood until he was chosen as a hero of the Death Archon and sent out of his family, then died and resurrected, then took the first trial and is here to take the second trial. It was a long story, but the man stood on one knee all through. To him it was a show of absolute respect towards the probability that Wraith might be a man that is destined to sit on the absolute seat. As dreadful and disturbing as it made him, he still was glad that something new has happened to Felfium. The only problem was how the demon lords were going to take this. Ah, a world created by Archons. Interesting. This is a pretty interesting story. But is filled with lies. The Archons cannot withstand a fight with the primordials, not to say create a world. I suspect something or someone is playing games. But that is none of my business. He looked at Wraith. I should worry about him. Being able to die and resurrect. I have never heard of an ability like that, and somehow it makes me worry. Is this the will of the abyss, or is someone using him to get to the abyss? The man looked at Wraith, still, on his knees. He lowered his gaze and smiled. He seems to love it here. A human loving the realm of destruction and chaos. How odd, I thought humans were creatures created by the primordial of light. Did he make a mistake? Chapter 26 The Abyss. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You can sleep here, the old man said, preparing his bed for Wraith. All of his composure and even his way of speaking suddenly became formal. Wraith found it uncomfortable, but how could the young man refuse such humble and warm hospitality, not with the torrent of the cold outside that got worse as the night strayed into its darkest moment. Thank you so much, but where will you stay? Ha, you don't have to worry about me. The man said with a confident smile and a proud expression. I am a man of the night, I don't need sleep. He said confidently as he hurried Wraith to his bed with a radiant glare that was looking to please its liege. Uncomfortably, Wraith laid. The man stood beside him with the same radiant face. Are you going to be there all night? Wraith asked, like a 9-year-old that doesn't want to get watched while he sleeps. If it displeased you, I shall turn around. The man immediately turned his back to Wraith. Ah, why did he suddenly change? Wraith sighed softly as he closed his eyes. I wonder what he is, a demon. He looks pretty human though. How do demons even look? He strayed through a few patterns of thoughts for more minutes before sleep began to set in, and just as it was getting sweeter and more interesting. Congratulations, you have entered Felfium, the abyss greets you. Again, Wraith found himself standing on the top of a mountain so tall that its height was amidst the clouds. It was cold, very cold. He looked down at his body. He was only putting on the black shirt and tattered socks which he wore to bed. He stared down at the message with sorrow and frustration. Why? 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 Why does it have to be now? He cried out in discontent with his voice echoing distance into the clouds. This is a different abyss though. He thought as he looked around, then remembered the old man's words. The abyss can take on different forms, huh? It is going to take on the form of a mountain today. The intensity of the cold got stronger, making him break out of his thoughts. He hugged himself and walked around the mountain top, which was around 10 diameters. And the journey down wasn't going to guarantee his safety. I will wake up if I die, right? Wraith thought. You will commence the second trial of death, jump down the mountain courageously and survive the crash. Title effect of one who overcomes death has been locked. You will not resurrect if you die. What do you mean I will not resurrect if I die? How am I supposed to jump down if I will not resurrect? Wraith looked at the message with a face full of malevolence and as if it was antagonizing the poor man. The longer you take the higher the mountain will grow, eh? He became flustered, confused, and not composed due to the new message. But the trial did not wait for him. The second death trial has started. The clouds that were high before suddenly reached his level and paused. Ha! He was shocked to see it happen, but as the message had told him, the longer he stayed the higher the mountain would grow. He had to jump down the mountain, but if he jumped down the mountain he would die and wouldn't wake up. Ha, damn it! Wraith ran down the edge of the mountain and was about to leap up but tilted backward as the enormous and tremendous journey downwards through the clusters of cloud and farther than even his eyes could see unveiled before him. Thump 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 thump, even his heart began to fail him. He couldn't even if he wanted to, except he was crazy, and unfortunately Wraith was one of the sanest people to exist. The only insanity in his life is the Death Archon and its awful trials. He slowly climbed down, carefully finding stones to step his foot on as he descended. It was easy at first and he was progressing, but all of a sudden, the cloud he had just passed suddenly descended lower than he was. Shit! It grew. Wraith's expression was bitter and full of fear, but he held on tight and began to climb down, carefully finding places to step on as he descended, one of the actions that cost him so much, and the mountain kept growing. He had to pass the same cloud 3 times before finally not seeing it again there even when the mountain grew higher, but then he was faced with the dilemma of having to pass another cloud until one foot misplaced and he slipped down the mountain, ruthlessly scratching his legs and palms, but before he could fall off totally one protruded stone saved him and he held tightly on it with one arm. He was there for a while even as the mountain grew. He didn't mind. He just appreciated the fact that he is still alive and dreaded the fact that he still had to reach the bottom of the mountain. He was there until his hands were finding it hard to hold on and his shoulders were hurting so much as if they wanted to tear apart. Then he began to turn his head around to search for more stones like this one. There were a few of them around but were as protruding as this one but were enough to accommodate his fingers. He looked up and discovered that even though the mountain grew higher the clouds were still far off. The fall must have been much. He thought as he looked at the clouds. His heart leaped with hope as he had crossed a hard hurdle that seeing the clouds gave him. The injury on his head stung as he began to go down again. Meanwhile, the old man stood dumbfounded as he turned back to find Wraith's body missing from the bed he had just laid on minutes ago. How? His voice shook and his eyes were trapped in a dazed state for more minutes before he felt a small trace of black smoke that blew away from the bed. His eyes widened immediately. There is no way, I won't recognize that. Some call it a god, some call it a primordial that isn't a personification but is the strongest of the primordials, stronger than even the primordial of light who heralded cosmology. Many call it hell and the birthplace of demons, although it spat them out and created a world for them. That world is known to be Felfium. But these demons have never stopped seeking a way to get back into it, and have never been able to. Few know it to be a chaotic universe unto itself with uncountable layers of infinite variety connected haphazardly. A mobile universe that can shift anyway and contain itself anyway. It could be in a room or be in a person, it could be in a fireplace or be in a beggar's pouch, but the nature of its plane remained fairly constant. A violent, malevolent place where only the strong-willed could survive, and the landscape itself tortured the mind and body of all who dared to pass. The abyss that had existed even before the dawn of primordials and celestials who are the gods of cosmology was currently leaving its presence in the room of a lowly retired general of Archduke Shax's legion of lesser demons. Overwhelmed by the faint presence and irresistible demonic pressure. The old man, Volmak, kowtowed beneath his bed. He had no idea what he was unto, but the world that demon lords, demon princes, and even archdemons seek is right here in his bedroom. Chapter 27 The Second Trial of Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The journey down has been a long one. Wraith couldn't tell how long it has been, hours, days, or maybe months. The constant darkness of the abyss kept the time flow of its plane a mystery. Wraith was making progress, but it was getting harder. His palm was covered in calluses and the tattered socks that barely protected his feet had torn off and were drenched in the clotting blood from each time he slipped his legs but held on so tightly that he wouldn't fall. The scratch marks on his head and arms told the story of how he had kept climbing painstakingly. After a few more climbs downwards he fell on a flat surface. His heart rejoiced as he fell on his butt. He happily stood up and almost fell off the edge, which was right off his back. He staggered back and stared into the wide view of several mountains that were as high as the one he was climbing down from. He turned to the other side and walked further inside. It was a carved-out space in the mountain, and it didn't even go deep. He sat on the floor and dropped his head as he stared at his palms, which were so unfamiliar. He had even wept as he was climbing down at some point, thinking that if he had decided not to take the trial maybe he wouldn't have encountered so much hardship. At another point, he thought of letting it go and just giving up on living. But how could he do that with that huge amount of money in his inventory? He hadn't even started to enjoy his life. He hadn't paid back his father and brother for the ruthlessness. He hadn't paid back the world for how they tagged him as a taboo in the blink of an eye. And he hadn't got to enjoy Felfium. There are many things he wanted to see in this world. The kind of people, demons that existed in this place. Their relation to strangers, their food, their clothes, and their cultures. Dying was just not a choice. And so was sitting around here. I have to get moving if I don't want to be back where I started. He stood up, unable to clench his fist even when he wanted to. He slowly got down the edge and continued his journey downwards. How long has it been? The old man couldn't tell. As an Act C fiend, Volmak was resistant to states like sleep and stuns. He also had an internal structure that allowed him to be able to survive for years without feeding himself, although he would need a large amount of food to make up for the time of starvation. And should the starvation continue, he would lose his stamina and he wouldn't be able to keep using the magic he was using to keep on his human appearance. But the greatest thing about an Act Z fiend is their unbending loyalty and discipline. It was born in the DNA of every Act Z fiend, just like the demon fiend's DNA is imbued with pride due to them being the closest to the abyss and automatically the strongest race in Felfium. They are also considered royalty. Most times you would find Act Z fiend being the general of an army or a butler, or an assistant to a great demon. It was because of their sense of loyalty and discipline. It was that sense of discipline that played out as Old Man Volmak stayed in the same position regardless of the brightness of the day or the darkness of the night, not paying attention to the number of times day turned into night and night into day. Not for a second did he think of looking up to the abyss because he wanted to stand up. It was empty and any stranger that mistakenly entered the cabin would think he was worshipping his bed, but as long as he could the presence of the abyss with every fiber of his veins and senses. He couldn't even if he wanted to. Act C fiends were conditionally loyal to their masters, but to the abyss, it was unconditionally, with or without their choices. Their senses forced them to pay obeisance to its presence. Wraith was getting further and further. He had even gone farther than he could imagine, but the passage of time had numbed his senses. He almost couldn't feel his hands but would still tightly hold on. His hands left prints of blood as he descended, and it has been like that for a while now. His fingers were peeling, and even his nails suffered the force of having to hold on tightly to something. They were ragged and bloodied. His lips were dry and his eyes were hollow as if he was a native of the land of the dead. He couldn't make a sound even if he wanted to. His throat was dehydrated and it would take additional strength to force his voice out his throat, so he just focused on expending his strength on climbing alone while spending few moments in his thoughts, whether it was creating an imagination where he was the strongest in the world and he defeated his father and brother in a duel and was respected by kings, presidents, and even the archons woke up from their slumber to thank him for saving the world. Then he was awarded the strongest and bravest hero in the entire world. He would later go on to marry the unblazing sun, and together they gave birth to 2 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter took her mother's beauty but her father's hair, but the sons took after him and he took care of them very well whether they were strong or weak. Different imaginations played. The next one would play after he was done with one, but the tearing pain of his shivering wrist every time he is hanging on to find a place to move his feet distracted him every time, like it was again as he moved his leg endlessly, but there were just too many places to put his legs. His eyes widened after a long time. Flat surface. He released his hand and fell on the ground, not caring how stony it was. he lay helplessly on the ground sinking into a blank consciousness as his eyes got dimmer. He could barely pull the strength to open his eyes and all his body parts were numb, except his ears of course. You have failed the second trial of death, you shall restart the trial. Chapter 28. Thank you Helen Lamer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wickedness is an understatement. But Wraith didn't even have the strength to argue. The next time he opened his eyes was to the strawed ceiling and intense cold that closed in from the window above his head. He flung up, but with the same degree, pain struck his entire body, his back, hands, and legs especially, and the old man alertedly stood up from his shout. Young man! Volmac shouted, looking at Wraith with a longing gaze but showing restrictions as he wanted to hug him and congratulate him on his safe return. Wraith had sank back to the bed because he had no stamina to retain himself. He was laid like a man who had a stroke. At least he still had enough strength to look sideways. He turned to the man and his eyes rolled down, 2 knee holes were carved into the concrete already cracking it. Did he kneel? Wraith was puzzled and his eyes observed the man's knee seeking answers. The man's black pants were stained with the same concrete material around the same place where his knee should be the moment he kneels. Wraith was even more puzzled now that he was sure that the man was in a kneeling position. The rays of light entering the room were disturbing his eyes' sight as he tried to look up at the man's face, so he was forced to close his eyes. You should rest young man, Volmac said. I will prepare you warm water and help with your healing process. He was about to run away but made a sudden pause as Wraith struggled to speak. Hhowl.ong. His voice was baseless and almost screeching till disappearance even within his speech. Ah, Volmac exclaimed and looked outside through the window and after a few seconds looked at Wraith. By my calculations, it should be around 4 months. But I guess in the human world the time flow is different, so I have no idea how long it has been from the perspective of the human world. 4 months. It took me 4 months to climb down a fucking mountain and I failed the quest. Abyss or Fel or whoever you are you fucking with me right now? Wraith sobbed, his thoughts violently upbraided the ones who had done this to him. But there was little to no strength to sob, his tears streaming down the corners of his eyes. After frequent squeezing at a point they were beginning to feel fake because he was trying too hard to cry. However, the Volmac beheld him with pity. He had never been to the abyss but had heard stories of the harshness and chaos that this plane brings. The young man must have been through unimaginable hardship. He glanced at Wraith's injuries with a sad countenance. Young man, hold on. I shall get a doctor for you. Volmac said and hurried out of the cabin, grabbing his coat which he had hung right beside the door. The place got very silent after he had marched out with heavy steps. Wraith could even hear his breath and the howling of the wind even though the sky was bright. It must be awfully cold outside. I can even feel the strong wind from outside. I wonder how the man was able to tell how much time has passed just by looking outside. Wraith's gaze slowly swept downwards to the carving in the concrete floor. Did he really kneel beside the bed for 4 months? Nah, that can be, not even a fiend would be crazy enough to do that. He sighed and looked around the house, slightly turning his head, and when he could not endure the pain anymore he stood still. The abyss really did a number on him this time. He couldn't move because if he tried to move any part of his body a surge of pain would literally split the part he is trying to move while subtly splitting the rest of his body too. Damned abyss. And he still failed the trial. I wonder if there is a consequence for failing a trial. Status. Wraith summoned his status display with thoughts of it. Hero status, name. Unknown class. Child of death age. 001 aura points. 00 mana points. 00 title. Celestia Slayer, one who devours death, chosen by the claws of failure, destined for damnation. Traits. The darkness beyond death, the dissatisfaction failure brings. Perks. Devourer, EX. Transcendent Sense, R. Intimidation, S. Skill. Truth Seeker, S. The skill grade changed. Not just that. But my age too. And who the fuck is 1? Stat, strength. 4 agility. 8 vitality. 20 intelligence. 130 endurance. 79, huh? My stats too. What the heck is going on? Wraith's memory of the only book that spoke of something like this resurfaced at the right moment. There are worlds where the voice of the world does not matter, our stats here are not the same there, our dust here is useless there, and the skill rank and hero ranking that sets everyone aside is nothing there. A prodigious rank skill is only equal to an R. rank skill, and an R. rank skill is far from the highest rank compared to how close to the highest rank prodigious is. G. rank, F. rank, E. rank, D. rank, C. rank, B. rank, A. rank, R. rank, S. rank, SR. rank, SSR. rank, UR. rank, USR rank, EX rank, UEX. rank. The memories played out page to page, and Wraith knew this had to be it. A world where there was no limit to how strong one could be. They didn't need to be chosen by archons, and the man spoke of a special kind of phenomenon that is power enjoyable than dust. Magic and aura. Magic is a form of using the formulas of concepts and nature to constitute a series of attacks or defenses or to execute different kinds of tasks, while aura can be used to enhance the body or weapon in order to make the body stronger or the weapon attack and durability stronger. One could even strengthen and cultivate their body using scriptures, which are books that contain written aura flows through the veins with guidance from an external factor. One could gain a body that rivals even the celestials. Wraith's face lit up. Things were getting more interesting. Just then his expression shattered to a somewhat sad form. Now that he had remembered the book he read over and over, he was made to remember how the fact that there wasn't only one world. The writer never specified which of these worlds had auras and magic, he only emphasized the fact that the rut was weak compared to other worlds out there. Hallen Lamer was pushing out the need for the world to stop seeking the comfort the archons bring and seek out a stronger and better force for the day that they may have an attack from the outside world. But was executed before he could convince anyone. Wraith came by his book by chance. He was given it by a passerby after making a scene at Kavanaugh City Library because they wouldn't borrow him their books home. I should thank that old man when I see him again. Wraith for once did not find it weird that he has never seen the man before or after he was given the book. He could miss details sometimes. Chapter 29, A Greater Force. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I sure would love to read the book again, young man. Volmac opened the door in hurry and came in with a man, slim and snake-y looking man. He had the appearance of a human who had the tendency to backstab his comrades, one with a tiny mustache that courses upwards and a pointed nose with small eyes and a dotty eyeball. His hairline was running inside too. All these features confirmed Wraith's suspicions, but never judge a book by its cover, even if it's a book you have seen several times. The man walked towards Wraith, shrugging and complaining in murmurs. It is one thing that you brought a human to Jarhan, but you want me to treat his wounds while maintaining a human appearance. Just as selfish, can you bet, Volmac? Not all of us fiends like humans like you do. The man shouted one last time before finally reaching Wraith's front and looking at his very obvious wounds. Oh fucks the primordials, did you climb a mountain? If he can tell that much from just looking at the wounds, then I guess he isn't a quack. Wraith's eyeball rolled down to the man who stood beside him. A portion of his doubt was cleared, but he still had not let the man off his scrutiny. This much injury should be nothing, the blood clotting, I can tell they have been there for a very long time. It is a miracle that this injury has not been infected by the fiendish energy. He said, and brought out an orb. His lips began to stammer, and immediately the orb glowed a green light. He placed his hands above Wraith's leg. The injuries on his legs began to close up slowly, and when he was done with the legs he moved up to the upper part of his body, and in 5 minutes he was done. Wraith regained control of his body immediately after the man's orb stopped glowing. He flung up and was relieved that no pain followed through like before. Thank you so much. He yelled with a bow. At least this one is responsible. Unlike some proud old war general I know, ahem. He said, clearing his throat and groping his mustache while putting his other hand, which held the orb, to his back. I owe you. Yes, and I will collect my money. Wraith was surprised that they talk in monetary terms too. And just when he thought about it, he noticed that they had been speaking the same language he had always heard from childhood. I'm sorry, but how do you all understand Theedish? He asked. What the hell is he saying now? The man kept groping his mustache as he looked at Wraith with an irritated glare. Manel, you will speak respectfully to the young man. Volmak said, gallantly covering the man with his intimidating physique. Or what? The man put up an equal form of resistance, his eyes began to exude purple smoke and his fingers blackened and grew out as he frowned at Volmak. After a brief moment of pressuring silence between the two of them, Volmak sighed and looked away. Don't worry about it, I'm sure you will come to regret today one day. He said with his eyes closed but opened them as he looked at Wraith. I suppose the language that is spoken in this world is Theedish. Yes, Wraith nodded. Well, you see we speak Abyssal. If you are hearing our language as yours it means a greater force is in play. You know what I'm talking about. Volmak stated to Wraith but looked at the man who was pretending not to mind what he was saying. Wraith bowed his head. The Abyss. The Abyss was just something Wraith thought he would be doing his trials and gaining strength in return which would help him to get stronger in the rut. But now being in Felfium, he is realizing that the Abyss might be such a great force than he can ever comprehend. But why did something like that choose me? Why did Fel choose me? For the first time since he had been chosen as a hero, he asked himself that question and had no answer to it for now. Are you going to stand around like that forever? Volmak confronted the man who immediately cleared his throat. I was just leaving anyway. He said as he walked out, but he couldn't get out of his head Volmak's words to Wraith. What did he mean by a greater force? Is he mad, trying to speak in code? Or is he hiding something? The old man restlessly rummaged through what it could be as he walked up stroking one side of his tiny mustache. That was Malin. Malin is an incubus. A subrace of the Ugol fiend. He feeds off living energy but using the orb of reversal he can use the energies he has absorbed to reverse the condition of a creature. He is a prominent doctor in the city. Wow, looks like he is a big shot after all. Thank you, sir. Wraith lowered his gaze as he appreciated Volmak. You can call me Volmak, there is no need for a thank you. I think the one I owe the most is you. I don't think I can ever be grateful enough for what you have done for me. Volmak stated with a warm smile. I didn't do anything. Wraith's statement ended like a question as he tried to seek out his memories if there was anything he did that was worth commending. He found nothing. You should take some rest, you have had it rough, Volmak said, tapping Wraith's shoulders. I shall go to the city and get you something edible. Most of the food here might not be consumable to you but I will find something you can manage. Wraith's voice followed Volmak as he walked away. Can I follow you? I would love to see the city. He exclaimed, with a bright and longing expression. No, you can't. Volmak's response was immediate and stern. As Malin has said, there are fiends out there who hate humans and will instantly recognize that you are one with the smell of your blood. You can't go to the city until the Abyss wills it. He added. Rest up, I will get you something delicious to eat. He smiled and walked out of the cabin, bending his head as he went out the door. Chapter 30 The Red Vampire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Being alone is boring. That's weird, I've always been alone and never found it boring. Wraith looked around the house as he lay on the bed with his hands behind his head. After trying to count the number of strays that were used to make the roof and failing over and over again, he stood up and walked outside. Compared to the night he arrived at the cabin, it was different. The snow could still be seen on the floor but very few and the plain black grounds were clear. He bent down to feel the ground and he couldn't help the familiarization. It's just like the ground in the Abyss. He muttered. I guess the abyss really created this place and spat out the demons. He stood and stretched his waist left and right, then his arms. He looked around the environment. I didn't notice the short wooden fences before. Apart from that, there was no tree or sight of any living thing. It was just the plain grounds covered with snow and spreading wide and as far as the horizon. I wonder how he lives in a place like this. The incubus guy called him Malin. Wraith knew nothing about fiends and their races, and he was dying to know. I guess I will ask Volmac when he returns. He looked around and was tempted to go out but didn't want to disobey Volmac. I've never had anyone care for me genuinely. Let's not ruin this, he said, and turned back. And just as he was about to enter the cabin, he flew leftward, rolling onto the ground and into a pile of snow that gathered toward the side of the cabin. Just as he flew away, a blurry figure smashed into the door, shattering it to bits that flew away. He quickly rolled and stood. Thanks to his transcendent sense, Wraith was able to avoid dying before he met his killer. Oh, impressive for a human. I never thought you would be able to see it coming, not at all dodge it. You must be quite skilled for a human. The figure came out of the smokescreen caused by the impact of his attack and the shattered door. He was donned in a white linen tunic with open sleeves and tucked into a black tight-fitting leather pants and a knee boot. His hair was red and wet, flowing down to his shoulders. Some fee strands were left hanging on his face. His deep eyes were as if he was dreading the very importance of life. They were filled with unwashable taints of blood, and his red eyeballs were its reflection. What is a human finding in this place? He said with a death glare. Seeing the way he is dressed, he must be a high-ranking fiend, maybe a noble. Damn, do they even have nobles in this world? Wraith was confused as to what his next step should be. He looked at the shattered door and tried to imagine how he would have shattered had he not seen a glimpse of it coming thanks to transcendent sense. I see you do not value your life, the red-haired man said, and his image from Wraith's vantage point blurred out. But before he could plunge his hands into Wraith's stomach, Wraith staggered backward in haste as he had felt the vibe of the attack. Using transcendent sense, he fell on his butt and the red-haired man swung into the open air. The man glared down at Wraith. By his face he looked like he was in his teens. Wraith felt ashamed that he was being beaten up by a younger one. I thought the first time was just luck. But he managed to dodge twice. I increased my speed limit and wanted to come and flaunt it to old man Volmac, but who is this bastard? His glaring eyes stayed on Wraith and his temper tolerance was already reaching its limits. I will make you regret ever stepping foot on Jarhan. As he spoke, red energy surged out of him like subtle smoke and twirled around his fist as he clenched it tightly that his veins were popping out. The wind blew away as he raised his fist as if they were running away from it, and just as he was about to throw it, Lord Absalom, his fist stopped mid-air but blasted Wraith into the air like a twig. Volmac's head followed through as Wraith flew and landed. The young man turned to Volmac and looked at his, which was occupied by a paper bag. I suppose this young man is not a stranger then. Volmac's gaze turned to his shattered door. He stood there like a sculpted being, then dropped the bag as he broke out of his state of shock. The emotion in his eyes was buried beneath his furrowed white brows as he turned to the young lord and asked him. Did you destroy my door, Lord Absalom? Forgive me, Volmac, I thought this human was trying to break into yo. Whim pow! The old man's fist was buried into his face before he could even see him move. He flew into the air and landed beside Wraith with his butt in the air. Moments later both of them were kneeling in front of Volmac, but only the young lord was bruised. I'm so sorry, Vol. He paused with goosebumps swimming through his body as Volmac glared at him. I'm sorry, master. He bowed his head and dropped his shoulders as if he wasn't the proud guy that wanted to beat up Wraith a moment ago. So old man Volmac is his master. Wraith found the scenery troubling, but he felt good. At least he won't yell at me since he's so nice to me. He grinned internally. And you? I clearly asked you to stay inside. Wraith was smacked out of his fantasies by the man's thundering bass tone. I'm sorry, I just wanted to. He couldn't resist the intimidation and also bowed his head. But master, this is not a joking matter. If it is heard that a human is residing with you, even father might not be able to help. When has there ever been a rule that says humans are unwelcome, we just hate them because of history? Anyways, what is a nobleman like you doing in the 13th realm all the way from the 4th realm? Ha! Right, I came to show you that I have been able to break through my speed limit. His brows lowered with squinted eyes as he turned to Wraith, but this human made all my efforts seem like a waste. How is a weak human like him able to dodge me? Wraith was dazed, the guy he was attacked by that seemed so manly was acting so childish in front of Volmac. What is this? Who is this old man for him to be so humble in front of him? You cannot call a person weak even if he is. No, this is obvious, I can't even feel any energy from him. Just a small amount of fiendish energy and that's it. Wait, you feel fiendish energy from him? Yes, but it is just a small amount. He said, gesturing with his fingers at how small it was. Because his father is a demon, he also inherited the skill, Dust Sense, an ability that only higher race fiends could use. With it, they can sense the presence of any inferior or superior energy. It is impossible for fiendish energy to be in a human, if not he would have begun to show signs of corruption by now. Lord Absalom is only 54 years old, he is young and cannot tell what dust is. Does that mean this human has the dust of the abyss?